welcome everyone to our January meeting. Everyone online, can you hear us? I just want to make sure you guys can hear us. Thank you, Vanya. And we're gonna, like I said, welcome and Happy New Year. We're excited for our first meeting of 2023, and we have a packed agenda, so we're gonna go ahead and dive right in. Elise, are you controlling the slides, or do we have the? You are. Okay. Excellent. Thank you. So this is our agenda for today. We're gonna.
It is.
Is that better? Yeah, I think so. Okay, great. So we'll start, by adopting the meeting minutes from last week's minutes, approve the agenda for today, public comment if there's any public comment, and then we're very excited to have David Bass back as our board representative. And so before we have him do board member comments, we're just gonna do really brief introductions. We don't have a ton of time, so we'll just do kind of like name, group you represent, whether it's a parent, community member, or staff, school board member, just so that everyone can at least put an initial face to name, and we'll get to know each other over the years. And then we'll go on to talk about the status of the anti-racism policy. We're going to have Dr. Harris, Jen, and sorry about that. Give a presentation on some of the regulations that are related to bullying and racism, and we'll have an opportunity to ask any questions. We're going to quickly review some bylaw changes, get a SOCA update, and then we're going to talk briefly about subcommittee assignments, and then we will go on to action items and next steps. So do I have a motion to approve meeting minutes from our November meeting?
Make a motion to approve the minutes from November.
Thank you. And do you have a second? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion passed. And can I have a motion to approve today's agenda?
I make a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
Have a second? All in favor? Any opposed? Great. So we will move on. Next slide, please. And do we have any public comments?
Good evening. My name is Carol Ann Tomlins. I'm a community member who's very interested in racial justice in our community. I think there's 3 quick things to mention. Number 1, thank you for all the work you've been doing. The March community forum that you held last year was awesome, and I believe that's what led to the anti-racism policy. And my heart was just overflowing to see the way you supported that policy at the Board of Ed meeting for signs and everything. So I have much hope for it. A couple of things that I wanted to share. You may be aware of this, but just in case. I have a friend who's a high school teacher. I'm going to use the pronoun they, so I don't identify gender or anything for school, who mentioned to me they had attended a workshop on microaggressions at their school. Wonderful. However, afterwards, they were very unhappy that, I'm going to say, the white teachers in the group were making fun of the workshop. They obviously did not take it seriously to the point where this teacher happens to be African American. There were name slurs, all different kinds of stuff that came out after people took this workshop. So what has to happen there? I don't know, but obviously leadership in the school has got to be really crucial. Administrators have to create the tone. We're not doing this for fun. This is real, how this affects people. This teacher that I have doesn't even want to eat in the same lunchroom because now she feels like these folks have said. So I see that you're working at data and policy solutions, so that's wonderful. I know that that will involve increasing the numbers of Black teachers and other educators of color, administrators in our schools, so I'm really cheering you on for that. And I don't know how this piece of accountability will work, so I know that that's going to be part of the regulations. I had the lovely opportunity to go to a documentary about Lincoln High School, which, as you know, was the formerly segregated Black high school, for wonderful history and pride. And the current principal, who was a young white guy, was obviously very supportive, and I thought, wow, this is cool. And then someone told me, there are no Black teachers at Lincoln Elementary. So I leave that to you, and bless you in your work. Got me as an ally in the future.
Any other public comments? Next slide, please. And like I said before, we'll just do brief introductions and then have you give your opinion. I'm Keisha Koa. I'm the chair of the Racial Equity Committee, and I'm a parent community member.
Good evening, I'm Shanita Hawkins, parent and community member.
I think the battery is dead, so I'll just be loud. Is it on?
Yeah, you just
Oh, okay. I'm Dawn Lynch, and I am an English learner teacher at Lincoln Elementary School.
Good evening, I'm Lisa Andrade, and I'm the vice chair of the Racial Equity.
I'm Sabrina Nail. I'm the ombuds with Frederick County Public Schools.
I'm Kirk Aaron, the parent committee member.
Excuse me, Scott Murphy, FCPS staff, director of curriculum.
I'm Dana Falls, director of student services with FCPS.
Good evening, Jennifer Bingman, Director of System Accountability and School Improvement, and also an FCPS.
Hi, Keith Harris, Executive Director here at FCPS and the parent.
Hi there, Cyree Williams, community member as well as a parent.
David can introduce himself and then
Hi, everyone. I'm David Bass, Board of Education member, and very, very happy to be back as the liaison to the Racial Equity Committee. I think it's really been an outstanding last year with the Racial Equity Committee, and I'm just thrilled with the advocacy that the committee did on getting the anti-racism policy passed. I think with especially the strong emphasis on data reporting and accountability, I really think this can have a huge impact on FCPS. And I think it can drive a lot of our work. I was also thrilled that you were able in the last year or so to launch the Students of Color Alliance, and pretty excited to start attending some of those events, including the upcoming movie night. I think that the main thing I just wanted to discuss and put on folks' radar is that the board has very much entered budget season. And I think that it's important for the Racial Equity Committee to think about whether there are areas of the budget that you would like to advocate on. In January, in about 2 weeks, we have our large, kind of our all-day budget meeting where different departments within FCPS come and board members, ask questions. And I think that any advocacy that you're looking for on different parts of the budget, or questions that you have on different parts of the budget, I encourage you to either reach out to me or the whole board, or to speak in public comment. But I would say January is an important time on that, especially with that big budget meeting, the budget meeting coming up in a couple weeks. So I'd like to leave it there. Very excited to work with you guys again and to get to know those who I haven't worked with before. So thank you.
My apologies, I'm still getting used to hybrid, so can someone unmute the computer so we can also have the folks online introduce themselves?
Oops, hold on.
Ah, can I do it from this computer or not the other one? It won't let me click it.
You should be able to speak.
No, they're all, you can't unmute. It says, I think it has to be done from your computer.
Tricia, you want to call upon them and see if they can unmute, like, for example, Anthony is first on
We have the participant list. We're gonna see if you guys can individually mute. I forgot about that, but I can't. Thank you. And I'm just gonna call you guys one by one. And if you are able to get on video just so David could put a face to a name, that would be great. Along with your icons. Anthony?
Which one is the big one? I don't know the name.
It looks like Artie's off mute. So do you want to start by introducing yourself?
Come here.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Arti Bhatt. I am a community member. I have 2 children in the FCPS system, and I am a new board member. I'm so excited to get after some of the work with REC this year.
Thank you. Camille?
Yeah, I got back. Sorry, guys.
Oh, you're right. Okay, Anthony.
Let me show my video if it's possible. I'm Anthony Kumson. I think the last time we did a little bit of introduction, but I am currently working as a development director for a healthcare program in Montgomery County, but I'm also a consultant doing work with underserved communities in Frederick County and other places as well. So yeah, this is my first couple of months on the board. My interest is based on the fact that I have 2 teenagers in the system, in the Thomas Johnson, and basically I go there and try to do what I can and support, and I'm hoping that this will give me an opportunity to be more involved in what's going on in the school system. Thank you for having me.
Camille?
Hi, everybody. I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person this evening. I'm Dr. Camille Bell. I am part of the Race and Accelerating Achievement and Equity department. I'm on special assignment this year. I have been part of, I think I just finished a year, right? Of the committee. I love the work that we do. And just in sitting here, I'm thinking about other things that we can do as a committee. So I'm very interested in meeting the new members, and thank you for having me.
Denise, did you want to introduce yourself? I think you're still on mute.
Oh, sure. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you call my name. I apologize. I am also a new member. My name is Denise Hicks Brown. I am not only a community member, but I have 2 children in FCPS schools. This is my second meeting, and I am looking forward to working with you guys.
Katie? Katie, can you hear us? Lucas?
Hi, everyone. I'm Lucas Tesserolo. I'm the student member of the board, and I'm really glad to start working with this committee. I've already seen a lot of the great things you guys have done with SOCA and the anti-racism policy, of course. So, yeah, really excited to start working with you guys.
Shower.
Good evening. I'm not sure if you just said my name. Good evening, everyone. My name is Michelle Early. I'm a business education teacher at Walkersville High School, and I'm still fairly new, but I am excited to be here. Happy New Year, everyone.
Sarah?
Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Gonzalez. I am a parent and community member. Happy to have been on this committee since the beginning and excited to continue the work with all of you and the new members.
Tyrese.
Good evening, everybody. Tyrese Woodley, also a community member, 2 young boys in the district. I'm an educator as well, and just happy to be a part of this committee and had the privilege to witness a great win in terms of the passing of the anti-racism policy a couple of months ago, and look forward to continuing to work with the committee. And it is my birthday today.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Oh, sorry, and Ivania.
Hi, sorry, my internet was acting weird there, so I had to hop on and off. But I am staff. I'm the Family and Community Involvement Coordinator in Public Affairs for the system, and I'm also a community member, and I'm also just excited to be here with all of you. Thanks.
Thank you. Please. So as several people have alluded to, we had very exciting news in November when the Board of Education passed the anti-racism policy. I think we have a clip of part of that discussion. Were we playing that clip? Or?
I think maybe we can come back to it at the end if we have enough time.
Okay. And so in terms of next steps for that, the next step after policy is developed is to kind of create the regulation that goes along with it that talks about how that's going to be implemented. And Dr. Harris and others are working on that. And so we're definitely looking at ways that the Racial Equity Committee can be involved in that process. And as we have more information as that is moving along, we will definitely communicate that with you. I don't know if you have, Dr. Harris, if you have anything else to say about that.
We are definitely starting to work on it. As a superintendent's cabinet, we have had a lot of discussion about the policy. We've had some discussion about the policy with all of our school-based administrators as well. And right now what we're doing is going through and really examining what we currently have in place that aligns to the policy. Because one of the things that we are careful of is doing a whole lot of overlapping and duplication and all of those things. And so we're going through an extensive evaluation of our existing policies, regulations, and procedures. And as we do that, we'll get through the writing piece of it. So absolutely, we'll be bringing back to the Racial Equity Committee updates about where we are, what we're doing, how things are progressing.
Thank you. And were there any questions about the anti-racism policy before we move on? Questions or comments? Were there any questions or comments about the anti-racism policy before we move on? Next slide. And Elisa, I'm going to turn it over to you to do the bylaws discussion. That's not just me talking about.
Okay, so we have talked in the last couple of meetings about changing our bylaws. There were 3 main sections that we wanted to look at, just revising There were other things parts where we saw like spelling and grammatical errors as well, that we wanted to look at, changing now that we have a full committee, with new members and starting our new year. So if everyone, could, I think Sabrina, if you could throw the link into the chat, so those of us that are on virtually can go ahead and take a look at the changes. The changes are listed in either red or light purple. So Sabrina's going to go ahead and throw that up on the screen. And then for those of us that are here in person, there was actually a copy of the proposed revisions that were sitting on this table over here. Just in case anyone didn't get them, feel free to go ahead and grab one now. So if you take a look at it, we're going to go ahead and go through the changes that we wanted to propose. And again, this is something that we've been, yeah, feel free, go ahead. This is something we've been talking about for a while now. And we wanted to present this to everyone, be able to discuss it, kind of work through it now a little bit in the time that we have. And then from this point on, we have 10 days for everyone to kind of think about it, and then we would vote on it, okay? So this would be the first presentation of the revisions that we're proposing. So that first piece, Keisha, I'm gonna like play basketball with you right now, and I'm gonna pass it back to you because you did the first couple of revisions, and then I'll take the last few.
We'll scroll up.
Oh, yeah, we'll start at the beginning.
So we talked, this is kind of the second, so we talked at, during the last meeting, we talked about some of these, but I can't remember if we actually showed the version. But one thing that we did was, we're proposing is increasing the maximum number of members, and that just will enable us to have some additional school-based staff, because we really think that's like an important perspective. And right now, with the 26, that would limit it to sort of 3 school-based staff. And so we talked about kind of increasing that number. And again, it does it. Those 4 extra positions could be a combination of, you know, different types of folks, but that will just give us some more representation. And we're always looking for ways to kind of diversify the committee to make sure we're getting the different perspectives heard.
Just a quick question. It says other groups of students who receive special, so it's listing other groups, and I'm feeling like I read that just really, and then this might be something simple, but there's a lot of marginalized groups. And I just think like with some of the comments, like I'm thinking about the public comment that was talking about like LGBT plus individuals. I don't know, like I don't want to start just throwing groups on there that need to be represented because there's lots of marginalized groups that need to be represented. But I just wanted the committee to think about that as, you know, I know this is a racial and equity committee, and that's like been our focus because of what we're doing. But I mean, knowing that like there are other groups even within that group, you know, that need to be, yeah. So I just, you know, I just read it the first time I'm reading it, seeing special education, farms, you know, English language learners. I'm just wondering, like, why those were chosen and not others, or, you know, vice versa.
I wonder if could we propose to then change that sentence starting from other groups and where it ends at representation. Maybe we can change that to maybe other groups who have been historically marginalized, and just leave it there instead of naming specific
I think that would be inclusive. Yeah.
And so after, we'll take all the feedback we get today, and then we'll send out a revised version via email. When we scroll down to the next update. And here we just wanted to change the appointments, because originally it was kind of membership appointments happened on the calendar year, but we just, based on the work we're doing, thought it made more sense to kind of make appointments to reflect the school year. So just, you know, we'd have a call for new members like over the summer, and that would happen so that they would be ready to kind of jump on and start right away in September. I feel like even this year we started a little bit late, and it just kind of delays everything. So we really wanted to move that so that we had everyone, you know, ready to participate from the beginning of the school year.
And another reason for that was also because of the students and the student member of the board as well. It made more sense.
And then similarly, we wanted to specify when officer elections took place because we didn't have that specified. And again, thinking about just working on a school year, we thought it made more sense to make sure that we did that during the last meeting of the school year in May, so that the new executive committee can sort of work together during the summer to kind of plan for the subsequent year. And I'll turn it back over to Elisa for this one. And then, oh, there you go. But I'll also say that I know for some folks, you haven't had the chance to look at this in detail. So we do have that period of time. So in addition to sort of the changes that we're proposing, if you guys see other things that you feel or have questions about, feel free to raise that either now or over the coming weeks as you have a chance to review it.
So that first change in red where it says Article 6, programs and programming, the reason that the article number changed because we wanted to slip this in before where it says dissolution and submitting amendments because it just made sense sequentially. So that would just be a change in the article number to include programming prior to the dissolution of a committee, right? So that's the first piece there. Then section 1 includes programming. That all of our programming would be observed and governed by the Board of Education, just because our committee is obviously a committee of the Board of Education. And then we wanted to be sure to include in our bylaws the Students of Color Alliance program. That is the student-led group composed of students district-wide. We wanted to additionally include the purpose in there to build relationships and leadership skills amongst students of color district-wide and to elevate experiences of students of color across the district through programming that develops the mindset of both adults and students within the FCPS community. We also want to put the structure of the Students of Color Alliance within the bylaws as well as a part of our committee, and then also discuss what general programming would look like, and that the general programming for the Racial Equity Committee will be focused on racial equity and inclusivity of all Frederick County community members. Does anyone have any discussions, add-ons, revisions, think about?
I'm a guest, but I want to say that I love your focus of SOCA and the goals of building leadership and giving the voice, because I think twofold that makes a lot of sense. I appreciate it.
We appreciate our guests.
Why, thank you.
Anything else?
A very small suggestion, but within structure, should we say Students of Color Alliance will include two FCPS staff members? Consist of almost sounds like that it's only the staff members.
Okay, yeah. Any other revisions? We'll take grammatical revisions, all types. Okay, and then one of the final adjustments again was just the number of the article that would have to be adjusted to change, right? Because we included now programming in SOCA, and then again that other final article, Article 8, just being renumbered, and then that very last adjustment, that just grammatical error will take effect immediately. Are there any other comments, any other suggestions, revisions, grammatical, spelling, wording?
And we said 10 days, but we meant 20 days.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
I said 10 days.
Sorry. So we have 20 days from today to sit on this, think about it, give ourselves some think time. And after that, what we'll probably do is contact everyone, all members.
Sorry, I actually think we have to do it at a general meeting based on
Okay.
our bylaws. So we'll do it during our February meeting. We'll work on it. But we'll ask for like any changes 20 days before that meeting, just to make sure that we have that kind of final version we're going to vote on in time for that meeting. Any other questions or comments about any of the bylaws amendments? And like I said, if anything comes up in the interim, don't hesitate to reach out and make additional suggestions.
Sabrina, is there a message on the bottom? Because I see a blue dot, or is that a blue dot on the message thing? Okay.
Lots of birthday messages.
Is it, this is Anthony, is it a design that we lost Article 3? If we go back to the previous presentation, it ends from 2 and shoots to 4. Is that based on the statutes, or can you go back, please? Yeah. So Article 2 says membership, Section 2 appointment, then it jumps to Article 4. Members, officers, and then goes to Article 7. Oh, it's based on, based on the bylaws. I'm sorry.
Yeah, this was just kind of a summary of the changes.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry.
No problem. Next slide. Are you going to be giving that to you?
Yep, so just a few Students of Color Alliance updates. Our Students of Color Alliance had some leadership development with the Minority Scholars Program leaders and founders that took place on November 8th. It was a fantastic opportunity. We had students there from all across the district, and you can see their pictures right down below. We are hoping to get Minority Scholars Program back up here sometime in the next few months to provide more leadership development to our students within SOCA as well, to kind of teach them and elevate them and teach them how to put on programming for our district and how to develop their leadership skills. They are hosting a movie night, like Mr. Bass said, on January 20th from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. at Tuscarora High School's auditorium. We did send out an email earlier in the month for everyone to come on out and RSVP. Just make sure if you do decide to come that you do RSVP through that QR code that's listed there, and we'll be sending that out again late by this Friday. January 20th at 6:30.
Now we will turn it over to Dr. Harrison team for their presentation. And
Okay, good evening, everyone, again. So we were asked to share information on the reporting process when incidences of bullying, intimidation, harassment occurs, particularly of a racially based types of incidences. And then what do we do? How do we track that information? And then what have we seen so far this year by way of the data? And so Jen Bingman and I are usually here as part of the Racial Equity Committee, but we've invited Dana Falls here, who is our Director of Student Services, who has a lot of responsibility for this work. Actually, all of us have different responsibilities, but Dana Shop do a lot of work with regards to monitoring and helping to support the execution of some of these data. Next slide. Okay, so the work of bullying, intimidation, and harassment occurs through our regulation 400-48. And I keep saying, specifying bullying, intimidation, and harassment because all three are different. One of the things that we've done, I don't know if it was last year or the year before, particularly as we were examining this regulation to make sure it included how administrators are to respond when it's a racially motivated type of incident, or when it has something to do with gender non-conforming, or religion, or something like that. We wanted to make sure we beefed up the language so that principals knew exactly how to respond. And one of the things that historically happens sometimes is when you think about bullying, it involves a repeated pattern of incidences. However, if there's an incident that happens regarding race or someone's identity or religion, that does not require a repeated pattern in order for follow-up actions and discipline to take place regarding it. And so we wanted to really specify the differences between bullying, intimidation, and harassment. Also, what we have done is really elevated the ways that we are allowing students, community members, families to report incidences that occur. And let me say this, we are constantly in an ongoing way examining all of our processes, procedures, regulations. As a matter of fact, we've been having even more conversations about how we'll beef this up even more, as well as some other regulations. Nonetheless, if there are incidences where a student needs to report, self-report, or others need to report, or families or community members, there are multiple ways that they can do the reporting. Of course, it's attached to the regulation on our website, but then also there's an online form that families can go to our website or students and just fill out an online form, and it's submitted automatically right there. But then also in our schools and on our website, you will see a QR code. And so actually, if you click that QR code now, it will take you to the online form. And so because we know sometimes students use their phones or other means, just click the QR code, the form is right there, and submit it. And then it's dealt with. So let's talk about then the processes that occur once a report is made.
So I think before I jump into that, it's important to recognize there's a lot of education that happens with students about what bullying, harassment, and intimidation is. That happens often through the counseling lessons from school counselors, as well as it's also included in our health curriculum. And so this isn't just something that's posted and never addressed with students. Annually, they receive information and education about what is bullying, what is harassment and intimidation, and how do you report that, and how do you seek help for that if you observe it or you're a target of it. So when a student is a target or a witness to bullying, harassment, or intimidation, they typically are going to report that through one of a couple avenues. They'll either report it with an adult, either their parent or another trusted adult. That trusted adult could be a staff member, or the student themselves can complete a incident form. If the student reports it to an adult, if it's a school staff member, typically they're working with the student to try to help the student advocate for themselves, and they may actually complete that form with the student to support them. Typically, a lot of our reports come in from outside of the system from parents, because the child reports that behavior to a parent, and then the parent typically will complete the bullying form. If a staff member witnesses the behavior, they're expected to report it themselves. Next slide, please. So once it's reported, an administrator is going to begin an investigation of that report within 2 school days. And so that starts with notifying the targeted students as well as the offending students, notifying their parents that a report was made and that an investigation is going to begin. There are times when parents position themselves to say, well, you're not talking to my child about that until I'm there, because my child was accused of bullying. Well, that's not actually the legal standard that we have to follow. We don't have to delay an investigation until a parent can sit with their child while they're questioned. An administrator certainly would begin that investigation as soon as possible. Once the investigation occurs, or during the investigation rather, the students are going to be offered supports as well, counseling supports, to make sure that they feel comfortable through the process. The administrator would be interviewing witnesses that are identified on the form, or During the investigation, other witnesses may come to light, and they would interview those witnesses as well. Often, depending on the age of the student, they're getting written statements from students as well. And so the administrator may question the student and take their own notes. If the student is able to validate what they saw in writing, they typically try to get that in writing from students too. Once the investigation is completed, there are a number of possible outcomes. So one possible outcome is that it reveals that harassment or bullying did occur, and then appropriate actions going to be taken based on that. It's important to note that appropriate action typically involves discipline. Discipline doesn't mean punishment. Discipline means teaching and motivating better behavior. And so I know Jen is going to talk a little about that in a bit. The investigation might also reveal that the incident did not meet the definition of bullying or harassment or intimidation. It doesn't mean there wasn't wrongful behavior that might have been disrespectful or that needs to be addressed. The investigation could conclude that it was a false allegation, basically meaning there was a lack of preponderance of evidence that the incident occurred as it was reported. Doesn't mean the person falsified the record, but there was the evidence didn't actually substantiate that the incident occurred as it was reported. And then finally, the investigation might reveal that the incident was a conflict between parties and not necessarily an incident of harassment or intimidation. And many of our reports of bullying and harassment are the results of an ongoing conflict that one student feels at this point overwhelmed and targeted. But the root of the behavior may actually be more conflict related than targeted behavior of offender to a victim.
So when it's determined, once the investigation is completed and determining the outcome, if it reveals that it is an incident that's a conflict or inappropriate behavior, appropriate consequences, interventions, and supports are applied in order to make sure that we are supporting those students in the incident and making sure that we're following the school system policies and procedures. And so no matter whether it is bullying or it's not bullying, appropriate consequences do occur in order to make sure that appropriate discipline occurs to help the student to learn from the mistake that they made. If it reveals that it is bullying, harassment, or intimidation has occurred, we actually missed an arrow. There should be an arrow that goes from that investigation reveals incident of bullying, harassment, and intimidation has occurred. It should go over to the appropriate consequence, interventions, and supports are also applied. So really all three of those boxes occur when it's bullying, harassment, and intimidation. So I apologize for that error, but there is an appropriate consequence. We provide the intervention and we support. But in addition to that, there's an additional layer, and that is that educational activities are provided by the school counselor in order to make sure that the respondent understands and to help them to learn and to grow from the situation. In addition, the school counselor provides follow-up with the individuals within 2 weeks and then 4 weeks of the incident to keep monitoring and making sure that it has resolved and that there are not continued issues. Because we want to make sure that the consequence that was given and the instruction that was given was appropriate to stop, and so that it does not continue, so that additional pieces happen. So again, there should be an arrow where if it is bullying, harassment, and intimidation, it hits all three of those boxes. It's just there are additional two when it is bullying, harassment, and intimidation. So systemically, we have systems that we put in place in order to make sure that we are monitoring the bullying, intimidation, and harassment that is occurring. I will say that, like Dr. Harris said, we are constantly looking at our processes and saying, how can we make sure that we are having the systemic lens and reviewing these pieces and processes? And so we are looking right now currently to say, are we making sure that we're getting proper notification to everybody that's necessary when a bullying, harassment, intimidation form comes in? We want to make sure that Dr. Harris's office is aware and that they are working and supporting with that school. And so that piece is there in some ways, but I feel like it's an upgrade that we can make. And so we're in the process of working on that. We also have systemic meetings that we have where we look at these data, we review it as across our division and where everybody's lensing and looking at it and then seeing where do we need to provide additional supports. What schools have more bullying harassment forms, how can we be responding to that data and making sure that we're putting things in place, and really working directly with the schools and the students when necessary to make sure that it's being handled appropriately and that we are correcting any misbehavior and making sure that all students every day feel comfortable in their classroom and in their schools.
Yeah, I'll just add, and Dana, you can also add some other things, but you hit a lot of it. Sometimes what happens is, or oftentimes what happens, when there are incidences that are racially based or student identity based or religious based, our office is oftentimes consulted about that. One, to make sure that school staff, as they are administering educational activities or consequences or discipline, that they understand the impact on the victim, but then also to make sure that in them trying to support and help students with incidences, that they're actually not further victimizing the person who's been victimized. Again, so, and then we're consulted on appropriate educational types of activities, appropriate consequences, all of those things. And so our offices work very closely together with some of those things. Dana, I didn't know if you had anything else.
Yeah, I can give an example to that. Annually, we go through a window of time when parents request out-of-district transfers. And so they come into my office through the pupil personnel workers, and they typically get approved by the principal or pupil personnel worker. I handle almost all of those appeals that go to the superintendent for those denials. And I've worked with my staff over the last 4 years to really have a keen eye when a parent indicates that it's a school culture issue that they're asking for the transfer, particularly around racism or some type of bias. And I work very closely with Dr. Harris's office whenever any of those come in, because we want to make sure we're looking at it through a systemic lens, not an individual student lens only. We do look at it through that individual student, and I'm often consulting with Dr. Harris's staff to say, give me your perspective based on your experiences with the school. And often we're looking into and investigating, even though there may have been no reports of harassment or intimidation, when that rationale comes in as a request for transfer, we want to dig deeper and find out what's going on so that we make sure we're providing the right supports. And to illustrate a point that Jen made in regard to we're constantly growing and changing how we're looking at data. Recently, we've had discussions about how can we ramp up the assurance that the follow-ups from the counselor 2 weeks and 4 weeks are happening. And so we're in discussions now about how, from a technology standpoint, can we put some safety checks in place to ensure that that happens, so that there's a way that we can validate and document that and be notified if it didn't happen. Because ultimately the goal, again, is change the behavior. We can't go back and change what already happened, but we want to certainly influence a change in future behavior.
So since the beginning of the school year up until December 13th, we had 369 reports of bullying, intimidation, and harassment, and 29 of those were documented as having an alleged motive of race and ethnicity. And the consequences for them really range across the spectrum. Because it's such a small number, we don't actually put like the numbers. Anytime it's under 10, we suppress those data, and those numbers are under 10, and so therefore they're suppressed. But the reason for the ranges, it depends on the scenario and the situation. It's important to understand the background, what exactly had taken place, as well as we utilize progressive discipline. So if it's a student's first time that they have made a mistake, then it may be that there's more of the educational activity and the support that's provided. Whereas if the student has had a previous history, then of course there's a much more severe consequence that is given to make sure, because we know that the other less severe consequences didn't make a difference. Because again, our goal is to teach and to make sure that we address it and stop it from happening. And so we want to make sure that we put those pieces in place to make sure that we take care of it. So that at this point, we would just ask if there's any questions.
I had a couple questions, or just some clarity. It was focused on bullying, harassment, intimidation, and I went on the website just to see like the form that was filled out. And my question is, because it was mentioned that a lot of it is just ongoing conflict. So it's maybe doesn't fit into that. But if you guys deem it as ongoing conflict, but they select, actions related to students' religion, or there's a huge checklist, actions related to, gender identity or, or racism, like, racial or ethnic harassment. Even if it's just an ongoing conflict, would it not fit in? Like, would it fit under? It wouldn't be considered bullying. Would it be considered bullying, harassment, or intimidation? Or if it's an ongoing conflict, but then they use like slurs to demean, groups?
Not necessarily. So in other words, thank you. Not necessarily. So if you have two students who are engaged in equally inappropriate behavior with one another, the name calling, your mother does this, your mother does that, and it's been a back and forth. That's a conflict that's disrespectful and inappropriate, but there isn't a target of that behavior. Does that make sense?
Right. I'm just thinking like when it gets escalated to, I understand like, you have fifth graders and like we have fifth graders at school on that, and they are playing basketball, and then something comes out where you have a student use language to marginalize an individual.
That would cross the threshold.
Okay.
So yes, that there may have been a pre-conflict that has led up to that, but that behavior then crossed that threshold. Absolutely. Then that would be considered harassment or intimidation.
My next question would be, thank you. I appreciate that. My next question is, how do because I work in an MCPS, and I know they have a bullying form, and it's very similar. And how do we educate parents? Because I know MCPS falls very short. I'm thinking about how because I see it's located. I saw you have a QR code, and it probably. My question, looking at that data, 360, some, incidents is how many were high school, middle school, or elementary, and also if I'm filling this out and my command of language isn't great, not just it being, and I'm not just talking about someone that can't, that's an English language learner. I'm talking about someone that maybe can't read on a sixth grade level. What is the supports? How do you educate parents, and then what is the supports for them so that they can process intimidation, harassment, or bullying incident?
So it's a great question, and I will say that I think we all fall short in communicating that or reminding parents of that. We do it through a number of ways, through our calendar handbook, through school newsletters, etc. But I don't know that we can communicate it enough, to be honest. And you always risk that crossing the line of people start tuning you out because you're talking about it too much and they don't want to hear it anymore. But I think we fall short. I think we all do. I've been doing this work across the state for a lot of years. When the first original bullying and harassment model policy was developed by MSDE, I was on the work group that developed that, and that's years and years ago. I think we fall short, and I'll just say that I think we all do. In regard to the support to the parent, it's the expectation that we have that our school staff assist a parent who communicates that there's an issue or a concern. And if that means we have to use translators to assist with a language barrier, or actually sit with that parent to complete it, that's not any different than any other concern a parent voices, that our expectation would be that our staff assist them if there's a barrier in them being able to effectively communicate that.
So my last question, I have lots of questions, but my last, big question is, you mentioned that sometimes parents will come to you for COSA assignments or, placements at different schools, and there may not have been a intimidation form or bullying form, but it might be a culture. And I guess my question is, if that's happening, I know, you said, Dr. Harris' office works with the school, but if that's happening, then we know that, if it happens from once, there's probably a lot there probably may be like parents aren't reporting. So like this number that we have, not that I don't question it, but just knowing, because I work very closely with parents and the PTA, and I'm not going to at the school I work at, where it's like they don't always feel what they can because they feel there's a retaliation, you know, and those are like systemic problems. Like, so I think I don't know, my thought is like, how do we like, you know, provide support? Like, so how do we change the climate, you know, so that it can feel inclusive for people to, you know, report and know that like their voice is heard and, you know, we stand behind them. That's just for me.
And I think I'll let Dr. Harris answer some of that because that is the work of his office. But I'll tell you that one of the things that there's a lot of things that make me passionate. But one of the things that I get very passionate about is when I see those concerns that I don't feel like we're addressing aggressively enough. And so typically when I'm involved in my staff, I'm reaching directly out to the administrator to articulate the concern and to make sure that they're addressing it. I know Dr. Harris provides a lot of support through his staff of pushing into the school to really address those concerns. So I'll let him speak to that.
Yeah, thank you for that question. And you're right, we don't know whether or not the incidences that are reported are accurate by way of schools actually reporting it. And so there are some incidences that could have happened that weren't reported and just were handled very differently. And so our message to administrators is you must report. That's been an ongoing, clear message that you have to document it. You have to go through all of the different procedures and everything to really tease that out. And then additionally, if you need the help, if you need the support, then call out for some help and some resources. And so when we think about if there's a cause for a school culture or a climate issue, we work very closely with the instructional director, who is the supervisor of the principal, and works with our school improvement team to develop a process, a plan, and some sort of strategies to be able to address that. And then we're often providing some guidance and support for that as well.
In addition to that, in my office as a supervisor of student supports, that is our restorative practices lead for the school system. And there are many times that I have her working with Dr. Harris's staff at going out, because honestly, sometimes we get those concerns communicated on an out-of-district transfer request, and it's the first time anybody has been aware of it, including the administrators. And so a lot of times, through a restorative conversation and being able to sit down with the parent and the student and really gain a full understanding, we can resolve those issues because no one really was aware that they were happening because they just weren't reported. And so many times, through the combination of our staff, we're pushing into the school to really make sure that we're taking a restorative approach to address those concerns.
So I just have a question and comment. You can, and then Sari, and then I know we have a couple people online,
okay.
so I just want to make sure we have a chat. But you can finish your.
Well, so Jen mentioned earlier about our systemic meetings that occur where you have Dana's team, her team, folks from my team, folks from the school-based administrative team, who sit down on a regular basis to examine school data, some of these types of incidences, discipline, attendance, all of those things. And collectively from our different viewpoints, we will determine, is there something more going on as opposed to just some isolated incidences? And we craft a plan systemically to be able to address for that school and support the school.
So forgot to set the stage before I turned it over to them, that one of the reasons we had this presentation was because as like the anti-racism regulations are being developed and just we really want a better understanding of like what tracking and monitoring is already existing and where there may be opportunities. I can promise you there was more than 29 racist, racially motivated events. And I think what we've heard, I think experienced as community members, what we heard during our forum and a lot of other things is like, this forum, and we've said from the beginning, is like not utilized by everyone And it's not just like, we don't know it's there. It's also like people don't think anything's gonna be done, so why bother? Or there's also, I know personally, like administrators who, there's also a cultural aspect of like, you don't want to be that school where racism is happening. So I almost feel like there is sometimes like a desire to cover it up. And if there's other things going on, like conflict, focusing on those things and not like that sort of thing. So I guess one of my questions is like, are there other ways we're kind of capturing or doing metrics around like racist events and culture? Because this again is like a super undercount. And then I know you guys are kind of doing continuous improvements and just sort of like any things that have already started or underway to really try to get at the culture of it, right? Just because, you know, I think I'm not saying it's always intentional, but I think there are cases where events that are racism are kind of categorized differently so that it doesn't make the school look bad.
Yeah.
So
one of the things that we'd like to hear from the committee is, as we are examining our regulations, and this is another one that we know we have to examine. So what are some of the suggestions and things? Because you're right, it could be categorized differently. It could not be reported. Parents or students may not be utilizing this. And so what are some other ideas and some thoughts you have as a committee that we should be considering as we continue to elevate this work?
I would just add that these are specific to the bullying, harassment, and intimidation, and the ones that were racially. There could be some disrespect, some insubordination, some other like other areas where the students received a consequence for that were racially motivated that I did not put into these data, but we are tracking that as well. So this was just specific to bullying and harassment. So we are trying to make sure that we are capturing all, even if it isn't, this form was filled out and it wasn't necessarily deemed as harassment, intimidation, and bullying. So
we added with our discipline data collection an opportunity for motivation whenever it's racially motivated or motivated toward a disability or some type of gender, et cetera. And so, for instance, it might be a physical attack that occurred. It was not reported as bullying harassment, but yet it was racially motivated. And so we've added that with the expectation that administrators categorize that. So those are discipline data that's not associated with bullying and harassment reports.
But I do appreciate Dr. Harris's question, because I do think that we do want to hear from you, like even to his point with regard to the community not feeling necessarily comfortable. I think that's what we're here for, right? Is to hear from you all, from your perspective and your lens. What can we do to improve to make sure that parents and community members do feel comfortable with coming forward, and they don't feel like they're going to be retaliated against because they're submitting this. And we certainly don't want administrators to feel like it's a negative reflection of their school, because we want it to stop. And if we don't address it, then it's going to continue. And so I appreciate Dr. Harris asking that, because I value what you have to say.
Yeah. And relatedly, I think the transparency is a big part of it too. So I know you guys talked a lot about like internally how you're going to look at that data and make, cut to kind of inform efforts on your part. But I guess even like to your point of like, there's other forms, whether it's discipline or physical fights where they're categorized. Are there any like plans to kind of share that with the community? Because I think that's one big thing we've heard, especially people who are like, I've reported, or I'll stop there so you can.
That's a great point. We have added to our website some specific categories. Like if you go to in the About page and you go down, there's equity data that's listed there. And so certainly we can look to add some additional pieces with regard to discipline, because right now we have absenteeism, we have like access to AP, IB dual enrollment, we have graduation rates, we have a variety of different data pieces, but certainly we indicated that we were going to continue to grow that data portion. So that's certainly something that we can look at.
Yeah, and even having like community events where that's discussed. I feel like I had one more point, but I will. Yeah, and I think, and one last thing, and then I'll think, but it's just, I think doing it more, like, I think it's great to have that data there, but also kind of like involving the community, because I do think we've heard at least from several people just as the racial equity, like to our email address of like, people who are like, we've reported things multiple times and nothing's been done. And so also having like, just letting the community know, like, if you don't feel like you're being heard at your school level, like what are the steps you can take so that it is addressed.
That was one of my points or questions as well. Is it possible for there to be a regulatory mandate for administrators to report those incidents that are racially involved? So where it's, it's not just they must, so where it sounds like a strong encouragement, but rather there is a mandate that they have to, with consequence. So there is an understanding of how important it is. And we know, more succinctly what is actually, happening.
I want to just add on to Sri's point, because in that you said that some racial motivated things are not falling under bullying, harassment, intimidation. But I look at intimidation and just reading what you have on the website, it says any communication or action that's directed against a student that threatens or induces a sense of fear or inferiority. So like, I think if someone is doing a racially motivated thing, it should not be just collected and recorded separately. That is, and I understand, like, because with MCPS, when the bullying harassment form is filled out, is a big deal. Central office gets involved. I talked to the director. Like, I'm working with the director and like learning achievement specialist, because like it doesn't look good. People don't want that on their website. Like, we want to be a community or a school system. And so how do we support, the feeling like, hey, this is a problem. We know that we have a problem, and and how do we get to it? Because I think that not just the delusion of not just finding it, I think there should be a recommendation, but also like it should be on here. Like, if it's racially motivated, then it falls under bullying, harassment, intimidation. It shouldn't be reported out separately. It should be reported out like under the umbrella of what you guys have.
So again, I would welcome the input from the committee. I don't know that I agree with you on that, because what's really important is that the data is there and that it is collected and we can demonstrate that it's been addressed, which is why we added those elements to the discipline of data collection. Because we've not ever required staff to fill out a form. We require them to report the behavior, but not fill out the form on behalf of somebody that doesn't want it reported on a bullying form, for instance. But we expect the behavior to be addressed. And I love your perspective about administrators being required to report. I would say that we've had discussions that I'd love to see policy or regulation that requires all staff to report, not just administrators, but to report all incidences of bullying or harassment that they either witness or they become aware of, to ensure that we have, because I agree, I believe it's underreported, but I don't know that it has to be reported on a bullying form. It needs to be reported, and we need to ensure that it's been addressed, because we still can report that data out for racially motivated behaviors that aren't categorized as, for instance, I'd want to see a discipline record for a student reflect if they physically attack somebody. I want to see that documented, not that they intimidated or harassed someone. They physically attacked. That's a much more severe behavior than the intimidation. And so I want to make sure it's collective.
I don't necessarily, yeah.
See, I think it's like, yes, go ahead, please. And I won't disagree that there are exceptions.
No, I was going to say that part of policy 117 is a regulatory requirement that we mandate the reporting for staff.
Okay.
So that's coming.
Okay.
And it really is aligned to what you were saying as well, with regard to that if it has random acts of racism in FCPS, that it is utilizing the bullying, harassment, and intimidation form in 400-48. So that is part of the policy, and so that is what we are implementing. And as you know, it was just approved, so that's going to be working through. So we will see increased reporting. We should anticipate that we should see increased reporting based on the policy.
Certainly, and I think it's important that it is reported on that form. I've had personal experience where when it's brought up to the administrative staff, that's what they're sent, that's what you're sent to. We'll go ahead and fill out this form, and then we'll go from there. Now,
someone having the fortitude to be able to continue to go forward, with that. While that may not be your policy, I just want you aware that that's what's happening. So while we have a policy in place, we have to make sure that those policies are being adhered to. And if they're not, that's being addressed. My second point is, the systems that you had for, going through the process if someone has, dealt with the bullying, intimidation, and harassment are great for student to student. Do we have systems in place for adult to students, bullying, harassment, and intimidation? And are those processes the same, similar, or are they different? Again, personally, what I have found is the particular form was, it's more addressed to students, and there's just this gray area of how we address it. The fact that the adult is an adult is intimidating in and of itself. So I would think a different process would have to be taken in order to make sure that the victim is indeed protected in that environment.
Yeah, it is a different process, whether it's adult to student or adult to adult. That's handled through human resources. And so they have their own processes of investigation and all of those things into the adult behaviors.
So again, that's something that I think that we need to make sure that the administrators understand that process and how it goes. I personally was told to fill out the bullying, harassment, and intimidation form, which was very hard for me because it really didn't fit. It asks for the age of the offender, and it goes to 21.
Yes.
Yeah,
thank you for that.
And I think just going off, and I know we have 3 people waiting, but like what Sabi was saying, like when we think about our students and we're here for the students, we need to hear that student voice. If they feel that kind of way with an adult, when they don't feel like they have a safe place. And I think maybe making that addition to the form or that revision to the form is listening to the voices of the babies we're serving. So I would really like to advocate for something to that.
Yes. So what we can do is have some sort of indication that if it's adult to student, then here's the process. Just making it very, very clear.
That's a state-generated form, and so it is intended for student to student bullying. And I agree, there needs to be much more clarity provided. You should have never been directed to fill out a bullying form. That's absurd. That
On the
should
form,
not.
it actually says, is this person a student? So it begins to go down that line, and then it goes directly to student questions. So form is wanting in that area.
I can't see who's. Huh?
Unmute.
Oh, Lucas, you can unmute.
Thank you. So I had a question about the possibility of anonymity. And so, for example, like if I witnessed somebody bullying another person and I wanted to report that, but I wanted to stay out of that situation, or I didn't want to be seen as the rat or the snake or whatever, or the snitch, because that's obviously a huge issue that I've seen, is that people don't want to be ousted in that way and want to kind of remain anonymous when they do report instances of bullying or harassment. So is it possible for a student to remain anonymous when they report it? And if so, I think it should definitely be advertised that that is a possibility, because I know that that is a huge concern, and that some students feel more strongly or care more about the fact of anonymity rather than solving the case of bullying or harassment.
Thank you for that, Lucas. We actually had that conversation earlier this week about how can we improve and enhance our processes to maintain. If someone wants to report and maintain anonymous, and then also, if there's an incident and yet it wasn't directed towards anyone specific, but it was out there and it had an impact, and making sure we have clear processes to address those types of incidents as well. So thanks for that. I made some notes here.
We would respect anonymity if the person doesn't report their name, but we can't guarantee they remain anonymous if they reported it and they've self-identified, because we can't control whether we get a subpoena for records. We can't guarantee that the person remain anonymous. We just can't from a legal standpoint. But we do protect the confidentiality as much as possible. And it can compromise the investigation by not disclosing who's reporting it. For instance, if I'm the target and I'm investigating that, and the respondent is saying, I don't even know who you're talking about. That you can't provide due process effectively to somebody with an anonymous target. And so it can compromise the investigation, and there's just no denying that. But we do protect the confidentiality as much as possible. We just can't guarantee it, because we do at times, it does rise to criminal behavior, and we do at times get a subpoena for records, and we have to disclose it. And we can't guarantee that won't be shared with that parent through their attorneys.
Michelle?
Good evening. So my question, and I know I'm so sure that this was shared in some capacity, but just asking for maybe the students who aren't very readily aware of this information, where is this QR code available? Is it possible that we can have it placed in every classroom? That way students have more access to it. Is there a way that we can increase the method by which we inform staff that this is something that's available to students? 369 reported incidents is a lot. I wonder if there is more that have occurred that have not been reported, and if they haven't been reported because people don't know how to report. I will say that I did have a student from another school contact me regarding how to report and how to file. So I do wonder if we have, and this is against no one, but I wonder if there's a way that we could share this information more readily, that this is a way for people to be able to report anything that they are experiencing. So that was my first question. And then I did have a second question, I think, to piggyback off of Cherie, just, and I apologize if I've mispronounced your name. Is there a way, the staff form talks about bullying and harassment and more so racism, but it doesn't include intimidation? And again, this is staff to staff, or if a staff member is filling this out, is there a way to also include that as well? Does that fall under the broad spectrum of the Racial Equity Committee? These are just things that I'm wondering as I see things happening within the school.
If I can respond to the QR code, I can't recall, and maybe Dr. Harris, you might recall this, which one of our board members actually made the suggestion of the QR code, but that's fairly recent, like a year ago, that one of our board members actually suggested the QR code. I'm sorry? It was Mr. Bass, okay. I couldn't remember which board member it was, but I thought it was brilliant use of the technology in a way that we could enhance how it's communicated. I will say that there are a number of our schools that do have the QR codes in just about every classroom, but I can't say that's true in all schools. I can say it is throughout the building in all schools, in hallways, in the lobby, in the counseling office, in the main office, various places. So it's throughout the buildings in all of our schools, but I can't say every school has it in every classroom. But it was actually the suggestion of Mr. Bass to do that, and it was a good one.
Thank you. Now that you say that, I know that there is a QR code that is on display in our school. It's under a heading that says weekly polls. I'm not sure if this is the same QR code. If it is, or even if it isn't, I will say, and maybe I missed it. I don't want to put blame on anyone else, but I don't know if it was explained what that QR code was. So I wonder if there was a level of lapse in communication. Again, maybe it was communicated and the lapse in communication is on me, that I did not see and understand what the QR codes were. But I don't think that it was explained that, hey, there's a QR code that's around the school, and if you are experiencing anything, if you need to talk to anyone, if you feel that you've been the victim or that you've witnessed this, that this is a QR code for you to submit your incident, report your incident. I don't know if that was communicated.
Okay, thank you.
Denise?
Hi. I had a few questions. I was hoping that some of them would get answered along with all the other questions that went before, but actually, unfortunately, it kind of sparked a few more. The first thing, everyone's talked about the QR codes. Is this something, not every child has a device. Not every child has a phone. And if they do, they may have a device that cannot read QR codes. I know some Android devices can't. Is this form available? And I will tell you, my children have made it clear to me that this generation is not paper driven. Is this something they can find on Schoology? Is there some other way they can access it on their Chromebooks? Is this something that they realistically can get to? Not it's in the handbook or the counselor comes in and does a presentation, but is there like some other way that they could get to it, if anyone knows?
There is an online form. However, we need to check and see if it's on Schoology. That's a good idea. Yeah, right now it's on the website. However, looking at other places where students regularly access, that's a good idea.
The other thing, I actually had a question about the process, but well, several. One of the things that's indicated is that if it's been determined that there has been bullying, harassment, or intimidation that's been racially motivated, of the three things that occur once that's been established, is that a counselor provides provides resources. What does that mean? Does that mean that they're giving something to the respondent that they are now self-using? Does this mean that they're actually actively engaging and ensuring that they do something? Are you handing them an info packet? Is there anything, is it more tangible than just providing it to them? Or is it something that they have to be self-directed to do? And then going hand in hand with that and talking about providing follow-up, what does that mean? And are those follow-ups significant at all? And I don't know if that can even be answered, but sort of going along with that, hearing other people's responses, it also sparked a thought about, if that's not being done in a meaningful way, where the respondent is actually, being engaged to change behavior, then the next question becomes, what kind of advocacy exists for those victims in the future? Because they're not being granted anonymity. It can't be guaranteed. And we all know it's not really, nothing can actually really happen realistically without revealing who the victim is. But if that happens, you've now opened them up to further bullying, which is one of the reasons, or harassment or intimidation, because one of the reasons why people don't report. Not to, sort of blow it up or sensationalize this too much. I work with domestic violence, sexual assault, and child abuse victims. And one of the reasons they say nothing is because if they say something and it's not enough, then now their abuser knows and is going to find a way to get around whatever that reporting system was to abuse them more, or just be more harsh in the future. The bottom line is no one wants that. And so is there any advocacy in place to assist people with that? So I apologize for that multiple thing, but what kind of resources are provided to the respondent? Is the follow-up that comes from that significant? And then what kind of advocacy or other assistance is provided to victims?
So I'll talk first about the resources are not necessarily something that's handed to the individual, but rather used with the counselor, with the individual students. Many times, again, we want to restore the relationships. And so we take a restorative approach. And so if the victim or the target and the offender are willing to cooperate in a restorative conversation, they'll try to work with both of those individuals, or there may be the witnesses involved and others who are complicit in the behavior. However, that's never forced and never a situation where a targeted student feels compelled to participate, because we want to respect that they may not be comfortable with that. Many times, though, there can be a lot of learning that occurs through a restorative session or multiple sessions where the individual has an opportunity to better understand how they harmed the individual, the targeted student. As far as the check-ins or the follow-ups, they're intended to be check-ins with those individuals to ensure the behavior has stopped, to be sure there's not an ongoing pattern. And so the purpose in the 2 weeks and in a 4-week interval is to allow enough time to check to see if that behavior has been repeated since then. And that's to prevent the retaliation, or at least to make sure that administrators are aware if the targeted student is indicating, well, yeah, that student has continued to harass me or has continued. But it's rather than put the onus on the students to report it again, the intention is to follow up, to check in to ensure that the behavior stops. So that's the purpose of the follow-up.
Thank you. And then I'd asked about advocacy or any further assistance for victims if something is considered not substantiated, but, or even if it is, and there ends up being subtle things that sort of fall out of the realm of this form, or if that's even anything that's been contemplated or considered.
I think our goal is that always each child has a trusted adult that they feel like they can go to share that it hasn't been addressed and that it's continuing. And so I think a goal is that we make sure that they feel comfortable with coming forward. And then whenever it's explained to them that it wasn't debullied or whatever, that there is a discussion about an action plan for if it does. Part of what we want our adults to do when they're working with students is to make sure that they talk to them about what if it continues, how are you going to handle it? How should you come to the trusted adult, and make sure that we have those safeguards in place. And so I think it's certainly something that we can make sure and really and we work with our school teams to ensure that they're doing it consistently and in all cases, and that we are really working to make sure every student does have that trusted adult, because that's where I think we have to really worry about. The student doesn't feel like they have someone that they can go to and feel comfortable talking to.
That's what I was going to say. I feel like that's what needs to be addressed. Because I know at least we've heard from some of our students that they don't feel comfortable.
And that's on us, right?
Tia.
Hi, good evening. So I had my hand raised before, but actually Denise asked all of the questions that I had on my mind, so I'm good. Thank you.
Any other questions, either online or in the room, or comments?
I did have one more. What is being done? Because I'm just going to be blunt. Attitude reflects leadership. So if there's not the belief that this is important, that this is something to take seriously, or believing that somehow these things can be reduced to, mere data points. And so as long as we don't have, these data points, but we have these data points, then we're doing fine. What's being done to, or what is the plan, probably more accurately, I wouldn't say it's been done. What is the, sort of the plan and the thought in creating a culture, creating cultures and the schools where that is, where it's understood that this is important and something to be addressed? Because I can tell you it is something that has been, that I have heard from students that they all know. I will say this, I have heard that they know there's a form, they know about the QR code, and they think it's bull because they think it's a waste of time, 2, it's a piece of paper, and that's not what they do. But more importantly, and I think the overwhelming feeling that I've gotten is no one cares. The staff doesn't care, the administration doesn't care, nobody cares. So they're not going to waste their time and then sit there and fill out this sheet of paper when nothing's going to come of it. Or whatever comes of it is going to be some feel-good kumbaya thing with the counselor. And I have to say, if the initial response is to restore a relationship, you're presuming that there was a relationship to begin with, and there may not have been. So maybe beginning with that as the objective is the problem, and not just attempting to, somehow conflict resolve or address some other issue. But, from a bigger perspective, culturally, how do we fix this? What is the plan to do this? Because if it's not important and it's not taken seriously, then 1, you'll never have a trusted adult for the student. And 2, they're completely wasting their time providing these data points because nothing's ever going to happen.
Well, I can only speak to what we've shared already relative to the ongoing training that's mandatory for all of our staff, schools, as well as centrally, that they participate in throughout the year. I can speak to the priority and expectation of our superintendent and cabinet, who made this work with equity a priority, one of her primary goals in our school system. I can speak to the work that we do centrally by way of monitoring, reinforcing, deploying resources, supports, and following up by way of expectations that we have centrally to schools to be able to try to mitigate against it and change cultures and all of those things. And it's a constant work, ongoing work that occurs. And there's more work to do.
I want to address the restorative piece versus the discipline, because they're not one and the same. The role of the counselor is very different than the role of the administrator in this. And so to say that there's a focus of restoring relationships and really repairing harm isn't saying that there's not meaningful consequences that are expected, because I think that's important to know, that an administrator is expected to ensure that that behavior stops to the best of their ability and to utilize whatever consequences are necessary and within the law and Code of Maryland regulations to do that. And so that's based on the student's history, the intensity of the behavior, the repetitiveness of the behavior, et cetera. But the role of the administrator in this is very different than the role of the counselor, who's really working to again, make sure that the targeted student feels comfortable in their school, but also make sure that the offender understands the harm that they created and has a more empathetic response to other individuals around them. So they're very different in their role, and I don't want it to sound as though a restorative approach means the student's not held accountable to discipline, because that's not true.
I appreciate that clarification. I want to be clear. I wasn't trying to say that that's not what's happening. Just that if the beginning objective is to try to restore a relationship, the only thing I was asking is, I was just questioning if there wasn't a relationship, then that's not really the basis. I understand wanting to make them feel more comfortable and trying to create empathy in the respondent. That's actually very different than trying to restore their relationship. So I appreciate your answer.
Yeah, in support of what you're saying, one of the things that I reinforce and am very clear about is that we do not try to restore a relationship where you have a victim who's been victimized by racially motivated behavior or gender identity types of things. That student should not be forced or expected to sit down with an offender who has offended them in that particular manner. So that's something I'm very, very clear about that we don't do.
Not Tia. I saw Camille's hand and then I think Ivania, but Camille, did you still have a comment? If not, Ivania.
I do. Just from the perspective of being in a school, being a principal, and seeing this play out. I think it's just really important to focus on listening to Dana talking about, he's talking about discipline versus punishment. And our counselors do not get involved in any type of discipline. Their support, their school support, student support, that's what they do. And I mean, as a school administrator, we dig that thing down to the studs. What happened? When did it happen? How did it happen? Where did it start? I mean, those investigations take forever. If you're really and truly trying to get to the bottom of it, we're talking about attitude and changing the attitude of the adults that are perceived to not care. Because if students perceive the adults who are supposed to be there for them, they perceive them as people who do not care, then they're not going to go to the people. My office was bombarded oftentimes with students who felt safe and they felt secured and they wanted to say, this is what's happening. What am I trying to say? Those students are not going to be saying that they're in schools that people don't care about them. So it's really about perception and having those conversations and being comfortable having hard conversations and difficult conversations that in many places, the adults that are in charge of having those difficult conversations are not comfortable having the conversations themselves. So I love the work that we're doing in Frederick now. I see the work that we do in the racial in the equity office, where it's, really I watch them leave and go support schools and go support students. And I mean, that work is very, very real, but this is not something that's going to be fixed overnight. Change of attitude and really, being comfortable having those difficult conversations. I'm just really impressed with the manner and the manner in which we are looking at this work, saying, yes, this is a problem. We need to, focus on these problems, but it's not going to solve itself overnight. That is most certain. And I think that's what people forget. This isn't a problem that started yesterday, and it's not something that's going to be solved tomorrow. We just have to be very, very diligent in how we do and say, if we talk about equity, this is what it means. This is what it has to look like. And that's the thing. I think that's what we're doing now. So I'm happy about that.
Thank you. Ivania?
I just want to echo everybody's sentiment and say, I think the conversations are exactly the conversations that we need to be having. And I know they're difficult conversations, and that's great. I am going to kind of pivot a little bit though and ask a little bit more on the process side. I have a couple of notes that I was just thinking. I'm kind of perusing the website now and trying to find we're trying to talk about access and how our students are finding or locating, or even parents are trying to find and locate these forms. Is there a way maybe we can partner with the team on public affairs and see how we can make it a little easier to find on the website? Like I saw on the presentation, it says, go to student services and go here and go there. Is there, like, we've been working on a lot of icons. Is there a way that we can create like an icon button maybe in public affairs, or maybe creating the path? The way that I found it right now was actually just having to search it. I couldn't even find student services under information for general information for students and families. So that's something to consider that I wanted to mention. And then the other thing that I also wanted to mention is, and you guys know that one of the biggest things for me is the access for our non-native English speakers. We do have the form in print in Spanish, but we do not have the form translated online in Spanish, and that's a huge barrier. So again, and also just the communication on that to some of our families, like maybe even using our Spanish Facebook page to try to get some of the word out that this is a platform or a resource that exists for both parents and students as well. So just wanted to put that information out there.
Lavanya, I'm already beginning to work with John on those things you're talking about.
And Tia. Tia, did you have a comment?
I'm sorry, I clicked off the hand instead of clicking off of mute. Yes, I do have a comment. So I wanted to kind of go back to what Denise was sharing and what Camille shared a few minutes ago, and just note that, you know, the way that I summarize that is we're talking about changing the perception of students that, you know, the hearts and minds of our teachers and administrators are in a different place, in a place of looking at the students and their experience, and the students feeling that their experiences matter. And if that's not happening today, which, you know, clearly it's not in a lot of cases, then how do we get there? And I think the starting point is the work that we're doing, which is setting the standard, right? If there is no standard, then expectations won't be met. But setting the standard by really outlining what the expectations are from teachers as far as how they respond, the level of sensitivity, the level of knowledge and understanding that they're required to obtain in order to be able to support our students in the way that they need. I think that's the start, and having that standard that teachers and administrators are required to meet, that's how we take the right steps in the right direction. So I just wanted to make that comment and say, you know, the work that we're doing to put these standards in place is how we continue to walk that road. And Camille's point is, it's not overnight. It's one step at a time and putting each piece in block by block.
And Michelle.
So I just first I just want to agree with Tia and Dr. Bell. This is definitely not an overnight process. This is going to take time. However, since my last question and comment, I do have another question. Is it possible for you to put that QR code back up? Since I haven't seen it, I have a question. I want to know if that form, if it's a Google form or if it is an Adobe type of form. I ask because, again, I know that on the adult level, it is more of a PDF Adobe type of form, and there's no ease in access for completion of the form. And I want to try to eliminate as many barriers as possible that may arise, preventing people from completing this form. Again, whether they're at the staff level, whether they're at the student level, whether they're at the community member level. I want to be able to eliminate as many barriers as possible. So is this a Google form, Adobe form, is something that requires you to print out and sign it? Is a digital signature something that is accepted? These are just questions that I had, because again, I haven't seen the form. I know the QR code was up there and I apologize for not scanning it at that time, but this is something that I want to know. This is something that as a club advisor, I want to be able to go back and share with the clubs that I work with and the students that I partner with on a daily basis. And again, I don't think that my school's community was aware of this.
It does come up as a mock form, which is, a system that we have that collects this type of information, and it can be completely completed online, and so you don't have to print it off. It can be done completely from your phone. It can be done from a laptop. And then when you hit submit, it actually sends an email to the administrators of the school, so they have a notification that one of these forms have been submitted. But again, we do have it in print form in the schools so that it's available for anybody who would need to have the print form. But again, it does take you to a mock form, and that you can complete it and submit the whole thing online.
Thank you. I was able to pull it up, which does lead me to the question, is this available for, is there an adult version of this?
You mean when you have to, when a student would want to report something with regard to a staff member?
Or even staff to staff?
It's different.
So that is something that has just been updated. There is on the discrimination for staff to staff from HR, there is a form now that is an online form that can be completed, along with other forms throughout policies and regulations have now been changed to online fillable forms.
Thank you. Thank you, Sabrina. Thank you.
I want to thank you guys for this presentation. It's been a great discussion. We definitely would love to follow up to have like a solutions discussion meeting. I think a lot of the sentiment is like, it is a process. We want to work together. I think from like the community perspective, just having that transparency and being able to like share stuff with them and show that, demonstrate that progress over time is like one way to build that trust back up. So we'd love to figure out, follow-up meetings to continue these discussions as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, of course we're going to talk about this. Yes. So tomorrow night, I snuck this one in. So tomorrow evening at Governor Thomas Johnson High School, we have our 33rd annual Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. celebration. During this celebration, we have students from all of our schools that are being recognized as King Award winners. We also have student groups from several schools that will be performing. I mean, it's just a wonderful evening and a wonderful celebration that occurs. Large event with a lot of students, a lot of community members. So we invite everyone out tomorrow night at 7 o'clock.
Dr. Harris, would you be able to send us that image so that we can email that out maybe later tonight? I can email it out tomorrow morning to the RUC and just to get everyone.
Absolutely.
And then I also just wanted to ask really quickly, I know based on, based on the policy that was just, based on the policy that was just passed, we, as a committee, we would give recommendations and continue to have input later on down the line. What is the timeline as far as being able to collaborate with your office? Because I'm assuming that data that you shared, some of that data that you shared would be something that we would use to make recommendations based off of. So what's the timeline as far as like when you all are, I heard you say that you're continuing now, looking now to see what you all already have in place that you continue to use, but could you expand a little bit on what that timeline is? And then in our ability to be involved as a committee.
I have a cabinet meeting later this month, we will be more clear on the timeline, so I'll be able to report that at the next meeting. And also part of that discussion, we'll talk about community involvement.
Thank you.
So in the interest of time, we have assigned all the new members to that committee, and it's in my email inbox, so that's really helpful. But in the morning, I'm going to send everyone. Most everyone got their first choice, but we kind of like divided up, and it worked out nicely where every committee has about 6 to 7 members, at least one exec board representative, and we just asked that each kind of subcommittee find a time in the next month or so to kind of meet and just even think about, because I think last year we had some committees where there really wasn't anything that they needed to do at the subcommittee level just because they had done work before and there just wasn't anything, but just kind of having each committee like check in to say like, is there some like really pressing work that we can do now as a subcommittee? Are we gonna, I mean, like, you know, there's a school climate and discipline data. I feel like the whole committee's involved in that. So just thinking about like, in addition to what we're doing as a full committee, are there other activities that that a sub would want to take on? So I will send out those assignments tomorrow morning, and then just ask that, and I'm gonna assign my exec board members just to make sure that like in the next month there's a time for that committee to check in, and then hopefully at that meeting, if there is work that continued work that needs to be done, someone other than the exec board member can take the leadership and ownership of that committee.
You said
And
that you want staff to serve on those committees as well.
yeah, you guys you're already on them, and so I'm going to send it to everyone because it's kind of like the 4 committees that we condensed from last year. So we just kept you in the same, but so I know you guys are on there, but I'll send it so everyone knows that. Yeah, they I think for the majority of like the end of last year, we just ended up doing a lot of big group work, so we weren't meeting as committees, but we did have initial assignments. So our next meeting is February 2nd, so I definitely think we'll want to be meeting. I think there's a lot of follow-up discussions we can have, an update on where the anti-racism regulation process is, and then I wish there's something else, but I just lost my train of thought. But I think there's gonna be lots for it. Oh, and just if possible, we'd like each of the subcommittees to kind of meet before that meeting, and even if it's like a quick check-in, so that at that meeting we can say like, yeah, we want to take this on, or like, no, we're gonna at least for the next months like sunset and focus on some of the larger initiatives, but just having all the groups check in so we can discuss that. Those are the main things. Any other comments? Yes, and don't forget the SOCA moving night on January 20th. It's very exciting, so I know I'll be there. And there's I think Alyssa will be resending out the RSVP. So if you have an RSVP and you're able to attend, please fill that out so I can have an accurate count. Emil.
I'm sorry, did you say that you were putting up information about the subcommittees? Because I would love to recruit some of these new members for
Yeah,
our
so we have assignments. Your committee, I think, had one of the most interest. So you have like 7 people on your committee. So yeah. So every committee, I was able to get it even where it's like 6 to 7. But I think towards the end, a lot of committee were suffering from lack of membership. So we've got all these great new members that are very engaged and energized. So very excited to put them to work. And if there's nothing else, we'll close out this meeting, a whole 3 minutes back in your day. And we'll see everyone next month.